All right, in this video, we're going to hear a little bit about the pros and cons of being a software engineer at Google. All jobs have the things that are amazing and the things that are challenging, and so we'll learn a little bit about what those look like for Shashwat. So I'm curious, Shashwat, what are your favorite parts of your role?
So two things. One is, on your individual side, when you have a project that's not quite clear how to solve, not quite clear if anybody has done it before, and figuring it out on your own. That's the engineering part of it. And I guess the other thing that I'm like seeing more and more of is just the heads up part that we talked about. I'm growing to sure it is something I'm used to at this point, but it's still challenging. And doing it feels fulfilling because the more I do it, the more like experience with it you get and the more you see yourself growing. So at this point, I kind of enjoy like, sure, even writing emails is sometimes fun because you can improve. There's everything, there's room for improvement in everything, and just seeing yourself do better and better is motivating. So yeah, solving an ambiguous problem and just getting more experience with heads up work and being more comfortable.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. I almost hear a common thread there, which is solving the ambiguous problem, whether it's in the coding space or in the, okay, how do I get these people orchestrated to get the project together, right? That's an ambiguous problem too. It's just a new domain and a new space.
Yes, I don't think of it as orchestrating people, but you're right. That's how it that's what it is.
Yeah, a little bit of violin, a little bit of cello. All right, play together, right? That's sometimes what getting projects done is like.
Yeah, exactly. It's a science. At some level, there's a science and an art at the same time.
Yeah.
You think about it that way.
Yeah, like getting folks to work together towards a productive outcome. Not always easy. Well,
Exactly.
so
Like without
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, without conflict. And that is a pretty hard problem in itself.
And that makes me want to ask, like, what are the challenges for you, right? What are the biggest challenges in your role at this moment?
Yeah. So one is, there is this positive side, uh, being in a very ambiguous space. And the challenging side of that is it is ambiguous. Sure, you might, solve 70, 80% of it. For example, more concretely, um, the area that my team works on right now, there isn't a very clear mandate for what we should focus on. There isn't like a very clear charter. So it comes down to us at the ground level trying to figure out where we're going, like steering the ship. And that's fun. Sometimes there are rocky waters that you don't know how to navigate. You don't know what to focus on. So the ship can only go one direction. Choosing what direction to go sometimes gets challenging because the decisions you make there impact like people on your team, impact other people. So figuring that out, direction and what the focus should be is one challenging part of it. And the other, which is not specific to my role, but it's always been a challenge for me, is time management. So I mean, the habits that I have now are like trying to get better, are from trying to get better at it, but it's still something I need to stay with and try to make a habit of.
Yeah, say more. What's challenging in time management?
Yeah, right? Like you have 10 things thrown at you. Everyone wants this to be done. Okay, like, why aren't you doing what I'm asking you to do? Why aren't you like helping me get what I want? Because they know that you're comfortable with something. They know that you know how to do something, right? They know you're good at maybe orchestrating people. They know that you're good at crunching the numbers or doing research, and they ask you for you know, can you help me with this? So those add up, and the prioritization part kind of gets tricky unless you take a step back and be intentional about it. So I used to have this habit of diving into, if somebody makes a request, you drop everything else and just like do it. It's like as if that's the only thing you have to do. And when you get into the cycle, it turns out that yeah, sure, you did what they asked you to do, but you still have like five things that you did not do. And I used to solve the problem by like just working more hours, but now it's more about okay, I cannot do everything. I can do 50% maybe, and for the remaining 50%, like how do I navigate the situation to make it not look like I am a jerk for not doing it, right? And the
Yeah,
other part of it is, sorry.
I was hearing both prioritization and expectation management, right? On behalf of the people asking you stuff and sort of how to navigate that. I don't know if that lands, but
Yeah, that's very important. And you wouldn't think so, right? Because like you think you're going to be a software engineer and your challenges will always be on the coding side. And yes, there are challenges, but with those challenges, you still have help. Like there are people who know things, and there is a culture of people helping each other build better things. But the challenge that you face on a daily basis is more towards like the people side for me, at least.
yeah, well, and it's interesting. There is so much more scaffolding, particularly around the code, because it's like, okay, if you actually ship something bad there, that has a really negative impact. And it's almost with the expectations, the impacts are tractable, but that
Mhm.
means you have to learn just through trial and error and through maybe screwing it up a lot of times. There's less structure around making sure that that works well, right?
Yeah, I didn't think of it that way, but you're totally right. Like there isn't a framework for doing things. There isn't a framework for okay, this is how you should organize your work. There isn't a framework for well, these are the people it's okay to say no to, and these are the people it's not okay to say no to, and so on. Yeah,
You almost have to figure that out yourself.
yeah, yeah. Yep.
Well, and I'm curious, as you think about what you've learned through that sort of, accumulating expertise, what's one thing you wish you had known earlier?
Um, so I guess one thing I wish I known earlier was how much control I have over my own career. So I mean, I don't know how much I can like tie this back to India or like just being raised there, but at least for me, I had the impression that like, you get hired at a company, you do what the company asks you to do, right? And it felt almost like the company owns your career. But coming here, I realized, sure, you can kind of go that way, and the company will do something with you, but it's not necessarily like doing what you want with you. So for the first, 2 or 3 years, um, that was my attitude towards things. But then I realized, okay, if I am intentional about things, if I want to get somewhere, it is completely within my power to do so. That's a realization that if it had come earlier, it might have been a little bit more helpful.
Yeah, well, and it is something I've seen and work with many folks on is this sort of taking ownership and responsibility, especially when it comes to thinking about moves and things like that. Like at the end of the day, you're the one responsible for your career. You're the only one who is. And so that can
Yeah,
be both daunting and invigorating at the same time.
exactly. And for me, a lot of it was to do with limiting beliefs, and those are hard to work through, and but you begin to realize like how valuable it is to grow up.
Yeah. Yeah. And basically once you're on that other side, you're like, okay, I can do this. And I'm
Yeah.
curious for you at this point, what does success look like?
So do you mean like personally, or do you mean
Both personal, professional.
yeah, so success for me, so I tend to think in terms of 6 month horizons and 5 year horizons. So short term, I don't think medium term too much. I think 10 years from now, where do I want to be? So my 6 month horizon is project focused, right? So right now we have something that we are doing and that I'm really passionate about because it's something that we kind of like grew from scratch. So making that successful, making the people who worked on it successful, getting people recognized, having impact, and proving impact from numbers, right? Being data driven, being metrics driven is also really fulfilling. So seeing numbers shift, which tell you that users are happier with the product, is really fulfilling. And then the other thing of where do I see myself in 10 years if I were to be successful? Um, I don't know. Like I think over time you want to get harder and harder problems to solve. So if I look back and say, you know what, I steadily challenged myself over the years, regardless of like what I'm doing at my 10th year or how successful my current project is. It's always good to look back and feel like you challenged yourself. So success, maybe along the way, is say yes to more challenging things and say no to like smaller, less challenging things. But smaller, you could do 3 of those, but a larger challenging thing, you might only do 1.
Yeah, well, and I'm almost hearing leaning into those big challenges and those big swings and knowing what you can say no to empower those, opportunities to grow and keep being challenged.
Yes, 100%.
And then one other question I have is just, it sounds like you had this curiosity, this early interest in computers. Are there any reasons that you would recommend that folks don't become a software engineer, or like the wrong reasons that you've seen when folks get into this and there's like a misfit?
Oh, that's an amazing question, Tory. So I haven't made up my mind completely on this, but let me just tell you what occurs to me. I don't think in terms of people who are not, suited for computer science, but I do think I've seen people like who are not happy. They're very capable, but they're not happy. And that's been like me at some point in my career too, right? And I guess the way I would characterize those people, yes, you have to work with computers a long time. Yes, there will be periods when you do not get the social interaction that you need. There will be, I guess, a lot of times when you run into obstacles. It is a very challenging role to take on, right? I mean, your role extremely challenging when you were in Google too. Like, there are a lot of challenges to overcome, complexities. So you do have to have that bandwidth, that patience for it, and like your life needs to allow you to have your brain be occupied by complex problems a lot of the time. So if my life circumstances were different, if I had responsibilities to take care of, which were high priority, I wouldn't necessarily want to be in a position where I have to think about stuff. My brain is like overheating from work, and I cannot focus on anything else. So I would think of it that way. And I think the other thing is, yes, there is good money in software, but yes, there is also burnout. I think is a problem. Um, I can't speak for myself because I haven't experienced it. You experience it temporarily and it goes away. But yeah, you have to be prepared for just like entering a PhD program. And you did it, right? It's like you probably know, like, there are people who are not suited for a PhD program. And I would say, people who like sticking with a problem for a long time and pursuing it out of like personal interest would be suitable. Not that anybody else couldn't do it. It's just like you wouldn't find it rewarding. So same way with like, software is like, yes, you have to keep chipping away at things, like trying to grow your career, like solving harder problems. So just putting in the time and that investment, uh, if for some reason life circumstances don't allow you to, or you don't prefer that, then it might be challenging. I would still say you can try it out and see, how you feel. Every company is different. I
Yeah.
wouldn't rule it out at all.
Yeah, well, and it was so interesting. The metaphor that we were coming to mind is that was coming to mind as you were talking was almost sometimes if I have Chrome open and I'm running like 50 or 60 tabs and you hear your computer start worrying and it's like, oh, like I'm not sure about this, right? If you're basically keeping all those tabs open and you're like, I can do all this at once, something's going to crack.
Yes,
And so
exactly.
almost being cognizant that like Google's going to take a lot of your Chrome tabs, right? Like a roll,
Yes,
a lot of your mind energy.
exactly. Yeah. Some people you can compartmentalize a lot of it, and you need to know yourself in that sense, or you need to like be in the situation and find out how you respond for like a year or two. But you're right, like having like 50 tabs open, who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want to like do 50 things at the same time? But yeah, you realize that you realize that it's impossible, and you come back and you realize, okay, there was actually just one tab that I was focusing on, and that's worth focusing on.
And so being intentional and thoughtful, and then knowing that if it's going to be something like the work you're doing, you're solving big problems, and so they actually need attention and effort, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I also wouldn't like say big problems because I don't want to make it sound more glamorous than other kinds of work. And I would just say there is less of hand holding. There is less of a framework. There's less of a structure in how you do things in software engineering. It's not that it's more important than other things that people do, but it's just like you're on your own a lot.
Yeah, and sort of that. All right, here's the space, right? Here's a nice white wall. Make something on this.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah.
You got to be ready to take that type of blank canvas and put something there.
Yep. And that can be daunting, or it can be fulfilling, or both.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting as you're talking about it, I more and more think with careers, it's about finding what each of us is good at and enjoys, finding roles where those happen to be the demands, most of them, and finding that match. And so knowing yourself and knowing what the responsibilities are allows you to sort of find that fit. I don't know if that lands, but that's sort of what
it totally does. And it goes back to the previous thing we talked about, which is, if you have something that you are interested in and you've been making a little bit of time for it over the years, it's probably something that you could stick with for the long term. But yeah, you also be very cognizant that picking something that you don't feel is a good fit is only going to result in temporary kind of temporary work where you might not be as satisfied or as fulfilled, and then later on you have to think about, okay, where do I go from here?
Yeah, it'll be a fit for a while, but then that lack of fit will show up for you somehow.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think you probably have ideas around how people can get their feet wet in something. I haven't solved the problem in my head, that people want to know what software engineering is like, but what is a good way for them to get involved? Open source is one thing, but working in a real office with a real company, I don't necessarily know what the best way to get yourself familiar with that is.
Yeah, well, and it's an interesting observation that sort of working on the projects gives you a sense of, I like this line of work, but the environment that surrounds that work, folks may have less exposure to. Did you find that your internship gave you a decent representation, or was there still a big gap in jumping into a full-time role?
Great observation. I think that was extremely valuable for me, and in cementing Google as a place that I would like to work at. And they treat their interns really, really well. But at the same time, you do get a feeling of, okay, things are serious. You're not there to, for fun and games. So there is something expected of you, and you are evaluated based on what you produce, not based on how much fun you had or whatever, how many snacks you ate in the kitchen.
Yeah.
But the good balance helped me understand, do I fit in? Are there other people who I relate to? Things like that.
Yeah. Well, and almost that, taking something from a passion to a corporate setting could really shift it, right? If you really love something and then you have to do it on a deadline, that might make it more difficult. And so finding okay, can I still do enough of this that I enjoy, but within this broader envelope? It's important to test that out.
Very, very important. Yeah. I mean, in college, you could stay up, do late nights to get through projects, whatever. People wouldn't care. You could work the way you wanted to work and get things done, but in the office environment, it's not always possible.
I don't know that your colleagues would appreciate a 2 a.m. ping. Hey, I'm working on this part of the problem. Jump in, let's solve this. Like that somehow.
Yeah, I wouldn't like it if someone responded to me at 2 a.m. too.
Right? That's not the culture you want to.
But sometimes people might, you never know what other people's lives are like.
Yeah. Well, and it really is interesting, this taking the aspect of it that you love and then putting it in this, group project envelope, which
changes things. Yeah.
Changes the feel. Awesome. All right. Well, this gives a really good sense for folks of sort of what this work is like. In the last video, we'll chat about what's coming next for you and what you're excited about this year. Sound good?
Okay. Yeah, let's talk. Right.